Okay, we are live on YouTube, and we'll do a quick comm check before we begin. So for those of you that are on, please respond in the comments before we begin. Just let us know you can hear us. There we go. Great. All right. So, hey everyone, Retire on Dividends here. I'm here with the one and only Jay Pestrichelli. He's the CEO and co-founder of Zega Financial. He's here to answer all the burning questions, all the tough questions, any easy questions you guys got. But I'll start with one, and I'll say, any news you could break for us, Jay, or what?
Yeah, hey, it's great to be here. Retire on Dividends is always a good supporter of YieldMax. By the way, despite all of the nonsense and garbage that you give me from time to time on your videos, we're obviously a big fan. So we appreciate all the coverage, of course. So I guess I'd say Fiat goes live on Wednesday. So it gets seeded tomorrow and we'll start trading it Wednesday. That is the inverse Coinbase ETF, right? So our second YieldMax inverse. And then the Nvidia one, dips, will go, I think, 2 weeks after that. So those are really, that's all kind of the news. We're excited to see a little more support on the inverse side. I think, there's been a lot of requests for the Fiat one. So we've been talking about it for a little while. So finally, that one's going to go live.
Chips and dips.
Chips and dips.
So do you want to talk about the pay cut recently, why we got a pay cut in distributions? Or
Sure. Well, look, the market has been, really stingy with volatility lately, right? The VIX again low, VVIX low, even the VXM, which is the NASDAQ volatility, all low. So even when you look at like the implied volatility of like a coin, for example, like we're in the 70s now, right? I mean, you could remember times when that was over 120. So
yeah.
Just volatility in general was really low for last month. Probably, seems like it'll continue to be a little low for July. I would assume August, we start to see a tick up in advance of September and October. August can be wild months, really boring or really volatile. But the reason we had low payments last time around was, or this most recent time around, low volatility can only, generate what the options market's going to give you.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to go through some questions. And
Sure.
For now, guys, just so you guys know, if you posted a question earlier, I'm going to go back to them later if I have time. But for now, we're going to start with the people that are actually asking live. So let's begin. All right, so here we go. Sid Bass, curious if there are any plans to start a single stock market neutral fund.
We have talked about doing things like straddles and condors, right? Which would kind of get you a little closer to market neutral. There's been discussions on it. Harder to generate an interesting yield on a market neutral fund, right? I mean, guess what market neutral is? The risk-free rate's 5%. I don't think a lot of this community is interested in a 5% yield. So how do you then go and scrape extra out of the options? So it's definitely something we've talked about, kicked around before. I think higher volatile environments, it might be more interesting. In this environment, I wouldn't expect anything new there.
Okay. And then there was a question on probably one of your favorite questions, but at least it's on ULTI. What can be done to stabilize NAV on a fund like ULTI? The decline is ugly.
Yeah, ULTI is a tough one for sure. The challenge with ULTI is, I think there's probably two things, right? I'll always be honest and tell you what we internally are talking about. The first one is we're actually not terrible at picking the stocks, right? That's always the risk. You pick 20 stocks and they all go down. So I think that's been a little bit of a challenge. But when you pick winners, which we have, they're capped, right? So you get all the downside on the losers, but you only get some of the upside because of the covered call structure. I would tell you we are working on ways of modifying that so that we are less capped on the upside. So when you get a pop in a big one, in a big mover, you're kind of out participating the way it works today. So that is kind of the first thing. So picking the stocks right, and then the structure could use some adjustment. To me, that really will be the NAV stabilizer when we adjust the tactics that we're allowed to use in Ulti, right? We're guided by the prospectus. Right now, the prospectus just says covered calls. I can't say anything else about that except we are working on giving ourselves other, options, deliberately using that word. But yeah, we're working. It's more of a structural thing. But vol's also a little low on that as well, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if the Ulti yield starts to follow what we saw with some of the other yields.
Yeah. So the various funds in Ulti, right? They have various, obviously, implied volatility rates. Are you still striving for an annualized rate around each IV? Like when you do each covered call, are you still kind of doing what you are in the single stock ETFs?
Yeah, I'll tell you for Ulti, this is no surprise, right? Because you've seen the distributions in the 190 to 100 range. We still shoot for selling options that can generate that range. So yes, remember, but you have to look at the aggregate of like the 15 or 20 positions we hold to figure out where we're going there. It's it's a more difficult fund to kind of predict. But I think you should know we'll adjust our strikes and the distance out of the money with the goal of yield first. So we're still shooting for that 90 to 100% range on the distribution.
Yeah. I think last I checked, they averaged around 80% IV.
But we will move it in a little closer to juice. So we might give up some upside to hit the income goal, which aggregate, which like I said.
Yeah. Okay. And not to harp on Ulti, but I think a lot of people were in the beginning, they're always wondering, because I think you owned the underlying outright and then you went to synthetic. And I think now you're owning the underlying outright. Can that continue to change, or is it going to be just owning it outright?
Yeah, given the choice, I'd much prefer to own the stock itself. It was more of a margin and structural constraint with our primes. So this is really, it's boring stuff. It's not that interesting. But the general thing here is we plan on just holding long stock, which you might have noticed in the last week. There was a little change last week where if the stock went through our call price, we didn't just close the whole position or let it get assigned. What we did last week was we actually cover bought whatever it took to get out of the calls. Sold enough stock to pay for that debit. Let's say we sold a call for $1, cost me $5 to get out of it. That $4 difference, I'll sell enough shares of the stock to pay for that. So it allows me to then sell another call on Friday if we like the stock still. So still managing just the tactics within Ulti to have an extra day of time decay, really the weekend, right? So put a new call on Friday that you get the whole weekend. Look, first question, yes, we're going to continue to hold the stock as long as we can. We believe that is set, and that's the using synthetics is behind us. We may, at some point put one on, but that's not our main approach. And then the second thing is you'll see us more active on the Fridays versus just closing the position and waiting to re-enter Monday. I think we went in today starting at like 87, 88% allocated, whereas other weeks we went in at like 60%. So we think it'll give us more exposure. You never know what a Monday is going to bring, and we were kind of underexposed on Mondays. Now we think we're fixing that.
Yeah. Okay.
More tactics, just adjustment and evolution of the fund.
Yeah. No, it's a fun fund. Max, who says congrats on QQQT, which reminds me, by the way, yes, you guys can ask questions on Defiance as well.
Sure, I'll take those. It's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks, Max.
SoCal Steve is excited for Fiat. He's another YouTuber that I don't know if you saw him, but he's making YieldMax videos as well.
All right, I'll have to check out the videos.
Would Zega from DJ, would Zega consider a daily distribution fund? And if not, why? Oh man, they want you guys to work.
Ooh, daily distributions. I'm not sure how the exchanges would accept that, right? Because you have to give them the information for the distributions first. I would say I've had questions about weekly instead of daily. What I would say is it's expensive and time consuming, right? The funds are already expensive as they are. I don't think you want to jack up the cost of the fund just to do that. When you're going to get the same net number throughout the month. Yeah,
but someone's going to come out with it, right?
I don't know that. I don't know.
So?
No, it's structurally like you have to give the exchange advance notice before they can process an ex-dividend.
Yeah.
Right. So,
We'll
You know, I
try.
don't think they would want to do it every day for the same fund either. So they would probably charge quite a bit more too. We pay
10%.
the exchanges for that function, you know.
10% expense ratio. Right.
I think it would probably cut in a little too much to the cost. So I think it's more of a cost and effort reason.
And I didn't plant this, but they said, how long till you grow out the man bun? Right?
Listen, I've been calling that the Warrior's knot instead of the man bun.
The warrior knot.
That's
They're
good,
all
right?
waiting for the man bun.
I don't think the folks that were making those took a look at the back of the doll when they.
I was so pissed when I got home. Well, I didn't really take it out, but when I saw it, I'm like, oh my god! I could have brought it to dinner and.
Well, you know what? Maybe we could send you new hair for yours. I think we can have a new. I think it just clicks on. I don't. That's the beauty of those things.
Okay, next question. When a defined fund makes more than the dividend, is that incorporated into the NAV, and will it be paid out at the end of the year if positive? All right, good ending to that. If positive.
Yep. Yeah. So yes, it's actually all the ETFs that we manage. If we end up having net gains that exceed what we've distributed in dividends, yes, we'll then make up for that. Probably in the last 2 months. We don't want to jam it all into the last month before the fiscal year end. I believe they all have an October fiscal year end. So yes, you're required to distribute 90% of your gains, or you'll pay taxes. And we don't want anybody to pay taxes. So we would distribute more if the funds had realized gains in excess of what we distributed.
So is it safe to say QQQY, JEPY, their fiscal year is going to end in like August? I believe they launched in September, right? So if 90% is not paid out by then, you'll have to do a large payment that last month of the fiscal year.
I think the fiscal for those are also October. So even though we launched in September, like we had a fiscal year right at end after. Again, I don't know why the fiscal year or how it's determined, right? So, but so yes. So let's say we're going into, let's just say it's October, and we have an extra 50 cents of dividends that are kind of built, or gains per share that are built up. Yes, we would add that into there might be a special distribution, or we'll just add it into the monthly.
Yeah. Okay. This is another new YouTuber as well. They love YieldMax. How long do you foresee the Nvidia and Misty products to be active longevity wise? Forever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that. I think as long as the regulators allow us to do it, we'll keep doing it. So there's no short-term plans or any plans to sunset these, unless all of a sudden they were all the assets left them, right? So I wouldn't. As far as I'm concerned, and the partners that I've talked to, these are designed to be here for as long as people will be invested in them.
Yes, let's hope. Got to retire on them. So this guy Sunil, he wants an inverse fund of funds. So if you have 3, is that enough for an inverse fund of funds?
I would say we've absolutely talked about an inverse fund of funds. I think you could put as many as, could be as few as you want. I mean, look, we're already doing an ETF on a single stock, right? Or a single ETF. So I don't think there's a requirement.
Yeah.
But let's make sure it makes sense to do it, because there is an additional cost. As you know, YMAX and YMAG have a little extra cost in them just to operate the fund. So I think we want to make sure it made sense, but I don't think there's any, requirement on how many funds to be in the fund of funds.
And someone's going to ask this, so I might as well bring it up. If there is an inverse fund of funds, you know what I'm going to say? They're going to want a different payment week, right? So
look, I think here's what I would say. I think that one probably goes in with when the current YMAX and ULTJ pay.
Yeah.
But I think I've also said on the other video that we did a few weeks ago, we filed for other families and other styles that I think could definitely have a different week.
Yeah. I think a lot of funds underestimate the power of when the payment is issued. Now that these funds are monthly, maybe, because I guess monthly is still, in my eyes, new, like overall, because everything's always quarterly, right? But these funds that are all coming out, they're all coming out monthly. But I think like it's obviously it's something they should all think about when they do launch.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty deliberate about, the first step was picking a separate week to see how people like that. So clearly there's more of that. So we have heard that loud and clear.
Corey says hi.
Hello, Corey.
Okay, let's see. My mouse is like Adam O'Dwyer, explain what happens to YieldMax ETFs when Powell lowers interest rates since holds heavy treasuries.
Okay, so there's two drivers of the returns in all of the YieldMax funds. There is the treasury rates, as you just said. We use short duration treasury. We don't like to take any interest rate risk. But if short-term rates go from 5 to 4, then that will impact the SEC yield. That's one of those data points that we put out when we put out the distribution rate. The other thing that it will do is, but it really won't impact too much, because that yield that we get today pays for the cost of carry of the synthetic. So this is a little nerdy thing that I'll talk about, but you can't just put on a synthetic for nothing, right? Interest rates work their way in. So while the SEC yield will get lower, it actually won't reduce the yield of the fund, because our synthetics will also get cheaper by the exact same rate. One of the things that we do when we trade the synthetics, which is the long call and the short put, that combo, when we trade those, interest rates are built into the cost of that. You just can't put that trade on for, it's neutral. It's just like owning stock. No, the market knows that there's a cost to that. And so it costs us the treasury rate to put that on. So SEC will change, won't impact the rates of YieldMax. The only thing that it might do is now calls might be a little cheaper, because what happens with interest rates, call values go up and put values go down. But because we're selling weekly calls, it'd be very, very small. The Greek, if you care about the Greeks, to look at this is
we don't speak Greek here.
No, all right. Well, if you care about any of the Greeks, look into R.o.D. R.o.D. for 1 week is, fairly minimal, but that's about it. So it should really not impact our distribution rate.
Okay, that's good to hear.
It's a weird answer, right? But it's a complicated question.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. That question comes up a lot. I always just say it's only 5%. Who cares, right? But you give a better answer.
Okay, there's some math in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Steel horses, as your ETFs and others keep growing, can the options market, I know you answered this plenty of times, can the options market absorb the volume without diluting premiums?
So we are deliberate about picking single stocks that can handle the size that we project. I'm not sure we'll ever outpace the Nvidia or Tesla or coin market. Maybe, you look at, say, some of the lesser traded single stocks, like maybe like PayPal or, Block, Square, that one. Maybe that could start to be a challenge there. The good thing is we don't have to fill those option trades in the exchanges, right? Or in the listed world. We could start to use synthetics. You've seen us start to use synthetics. Sorry, flexes. I meant flexes.
Yeah.
You've seen us start to use flexes with Misty, right? All the short calls are now flexes, right? So we have the ability to mathematically price those options and then trade at the price with our liquidity providers. When I say liquidity providers, I mean market makers like Citadel, Susquehanna, Jane Street, Old Mission. Those are places, destinations that we fill our trades with. So the nice thing about a flex is you can mathematically define what the price is going to be, and you're not at so much the discretion or will of the market moving those up and down. The math is the math. You'd have to look at the overall volatility of the ticker, and if we could lower that, that'd be pretty darn impressive. But for now, we're not even close to even knocking on that door. We do have alternatives. You may see us at some point spread out the strikes over multiple expirations. Today, sometimes you see multiple strikes. I know you like when we do that sometimes.
Ladder strikes.
Yeah, ladder the strikes. But we may spread them out over multiple expirations too. and we may move to flexes. So we have a lot of ways of dealing with any of those challenges.
All right. So for the newer viewers, when you say flexes, they're probably like, what the hell is he talking about, right? So not only am I going to ask you just a quick overview of what that is, but can you do flex on the synthetic as well, or is it just the weekly calls as you stated?
Yeah. So a flex option basically allows you to create a strike price, expiration of your choice, and then the market will price that. So you'll notice, like for a lot of our short puts, we have a 0.01 at the end, right? Whether it's 250, 0.01. We created that option just for us, and then the market makers will price that for us. And there's math that goes into that, right? There's a set calculation that everybody uses. The only difference is who's got what interest rates internally, but they're all very, very similar. So we could create an option of whatever we want it to be, right? It doesn't have to be one that's traded on the listed markets. So that is a choice we use. You ask, can we use it for the full synthetics? Yes, absolutely. You see we're doing short calls where you could do long calls. We could do short puts. We could even do deep in the money options. Like if you look at the YBIT option, for example, that 35 strike that we use, that we do the put with, that's a flex. So we can flexes are like just designed to give you flexibility to figure out exactly where you want to take your risk. The other thing it lets you do is choose American versus European style. So do you have an early assignment risk or not? All those kinds of things. So they give you a lot of choices on how you build, and you could really pinpoint how you construct the fund and avoid any kind of landmines or accidental things like an accidental assignment or a humongous dividend that might come out on BITO that dramatically would impact a normal at the money build.
So, but are you always using flex or not?
We always use flexes on the short put in YieldMax, in the YieldMax builds.
But not always on the synthetic.
Not always on the long call, and not always on the short, rarely on the short call. Yeah.
Because I don't know, like Coney the other week, it was getting killed, right? They're synthetic, and part of it got closed and rolled, down in price. Was that because of early assignment, or was that just the decision that was made?
It was not early assignment and those in the money puts, but that was the risk we're trying to avoid, right? We don't want to get assigned on the short put, right? So when a short put is deep in the money, if there's no extrinsic left or a small bit of time value left in the option, the person on the other side of that put, it makes sense for them to assign you, right? To exercise and get assigned. Well, we use the flex to prevent that because we use European style flexes. So you can't assign early. You can only assign on the day of expiration. Now, the reason we rolled the coin positions early was a margin reason, right? Because if you noticed, our synthetic strike was like, I think 260, and we were selling like 230s, 225s. That caused another margin requirement. So now, normally in a normal YieldMax, sorry, this is more construction stuff for everybody. When you have, let's say we did 260, so we're long at 260 call, short at 260 put. If we're selling the 280s, that call spread is a debit call spread, right? The most I can lose is what I paid for it. But if now the market goes down and I'm selling 220 calls against the 260, that's a $40 credit spread. It has its own margin requirement in addition to now the short 260 put. So we end up having a double requirement. We don't want to do that. So usually our brokers let us run with it, but we don't want to have to reduce our position. We just roll the spread. We're going to have to roll it in 2 weeks anyway. So all the trades happen within the same month. There's really more margin maintenance than anything else. A little bit of a hassle of option strategies, but listen, that's what we're here for.
It's some of the headache we don't see.
Yeah. You don't care. Why do you care about the margin requirement? It matters. Right? Your broker tells you what you owe on a margin requirement. So by the way, it doesn't mean we have a debit balance. It just means we have an option requirement. Those are different things.
Max has a suggestion. Single stock target funds pay 20% and call it NVDT. It would be huge. Well, I guess SPY-T and QQQT, they are the 20%ers, right? And SPY-T is doing well so far.
Yeah, Max is a smart guy. I'm going to leave it at that, Max.
He loves his options.
No, that's good. I mean, it's obviously something we've talked about, of course.
How about some common options strategy funds implemented on NASDAQ, S&P, something like weekly iron condors, daily flies, or overnight put credit spreads. There's some option terms.
Yeah. Also, so iron condors are, spreads with puts and calls at the same time. Put credit spreads are more of a hedged approach, right? Defined risk, those kinds of things. All stuff that we have talked about. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Look, I like the daily flyers. Hopefully Ulti can evolve into that a little more. We have the discretion to do that there. And like I said, with more tools, I think we'll be able to capture more upside going forward.
Okay. Oh, see, back to the weekly, please provide a new fund that pays the last week of each month, 22nd to 30th. Yeah, I think that's a no competition month.
Okay.
I mean,
we'll own the last week.
That's the last week. Yeah, I think last week of the month. I think Clip has that right now. So do you see the NAV going up moving forward? I'm seeing a lot of negative volatility after the monthly contributions. Why do you think this is happening? I don't know what fund he's talking about. I
think we could just address this generally, right? So we all know after the distributions are paid, the price of the NAV drops. Always. That's not a market thing. That's just, and that's not a problem with the fund. That's just with anything. Even with a stock that pays a distribution, it goes down by the amount of the distribution, right? So if you have a $20 stock that pays $1 dividend on X date, the price is 19, but you're going to get paid $1. So that equals the $20. So if that's viewed as volatility, that's not real volatility. That's actually nothing to do with the movement of the fund itself. That's just the mechanics of the market, right? You can't, create, dollars out of nothing, right? It just something has to happen. Exactly. So the way that we always talk about dealing with this is reinvest that dollar, and you end up still having, let's say you had 100 shares at $20, you still have $2,000 invested in the fund after that ex-div, and you put the dollar to work. You just end up having more shares than you started. Now you're starting to compound your shares. But I know I've talked about that quite a bit. It's one of those things internally. We make sure we always put those funds on a DRIP, dividend reinvestment program. Your broker should allow you to do it. I know people want to take money out of the funds, and that's fine. But if you don't reinvest those dollars, all you're doing is divesting to cash, right? You're letting the fund pay you out over time. And yes, while the NAV can maintain itself because of upward movement in the underlying, eventually that you'll distribute yourself to cash because we're going to continue to pay those high distributions. It is unique to dynamic here.
Okay. I love this. Is it possible to increase the yield of QQQY? 60% is not enough.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept because we talk about it. By the way, the way we do the math on this, just like the YieldMax funds, is we'll calculate what did we make in time value throughout the month, selling the daily and the money puts, and then distribute that. Like that's actually the dollars. We could increase it, but we get more pushback on the NAV decline than we do anything else when it comes to the Defiance funds, not SPY-T and QQQT, but like QQQY and IWI and JPY. Those, there's more of a pushback. Don't distribute as much, have the NAV be more stable. So we get kind of competing arguments there. I'll tell you, so for now, we've said, let's just stick to the way that we've communicated it. We can reassess in a year if something should change there. So that would be the September timeframe, as you just mentioned. Is there a way to change? But all we're distributing is what we earn in the time premium. And that's always been the goal of the fund.
Yeah, I mean, plus, like you have QQQY. I mean, that's pretty high yield. And if that's too dangerous, you go to QQQT. Now, it's almost like you have the options. And I'm sure you're going to have IWMT to have the other one of that. So I feel like Defiance is building up their nice little variance of options there.
Yeah, that's true. If you want more growth, go QQQT. You want more yield, you go QQQY.
Tesle question. Joe says, what's the view on potential share price recovery for Tesle? The reverse split really hurt a lot of investors. Well, I assume he means mentally, right? Half the shares and double the average cost.
Financially, it didn't hurt anybody.
Exactly.
Right? There was no financial impact. When we cut the share price, the dividends doubled, right? Like those are all linked together. So look, I think what we saw the last 2 weeks in Tesle is an exact example of if the underlying goes up, you can have NAV appreciation in the ETF there too, right? I would maybe on the flip side, not an answer everybody wants to hear, like there can be more, reverse splits as the ETFs, their NAV gets lower to like the 10 range, 9 range. It's just, it allows you to keep the fund kind of listed everywhere, right? A lot of option-based stuff can do this. And while we don't have the problem of, the NAV decay due to compounding that leverage funds have, it is something that we're definitely aware of. Nobody wants to have the reverse split, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change your income per month. It may change your share count, may change the value of the NAV, but it's not going to change the yield. It doesn't matter at all to the yield of the fund.
Yeah. Like I said, it's probably just more of a mental game. But once they went through it once, I'm sure it won't be as bad the next time. But so $10 is probably, or under $10 is probably the method for YieldMax and Defiance. Like if something goes under $10, that's when the thinking of reverse split may happen.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, your ETF below $10 then starts to eliminate, its availability on brokerage platforms. Actually, it's under 5. Under 5 is like the no-no zone.
You just don't want to get too close to that risk.
Yeah, so I'd say that's like I can't disclose anything there, but I think that's a general good rule of thumb.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you kind of answered this before. How long do you expect Nvidia and Misty ETFs be around? So
forever.
Yeah, forever and ever. Oh boy, look at this one. Will there be an inverse YMAC?
Ooh. We haven't filed for that. Actually, we haven't even talked about that, but think about it, right? We filed for Apple, Nvidia, Tesla. So those are already filed. I guess we're halfway there. So then maybe that ends up being the fund-to-fund reverses. So, I'm not sure how interesting, the Meta and Alphabets of the world are and Microsoft's are to be the inverse, but there's nothing that says we can't do those. The yields on those are still good, but less interesting than some of the, the 50 plus percenters, right? So there's definitely some lower guys in there.
Yeah, YMAG. Well, I'm showing YMAG is going to beat YMAX this month, but we'll see.
And you could thank Tesla for that.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. I mean, Tesla just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, Tesla. It was due to happen. Again, back to the unappreciated IV. Here they go again. 10%, 6%. It's like, damn.
Don't I know it?
You can't spread it out. All right. So what are the top 3 to 4 funds that you think will hold the NAV the best over? I'm guessing you can't answer this question, but
look, I can tell you what's going to drive the NAV to hold it right. It's the performance of the underlying, right? So if you could pick the best performing underlying stocks, then those are the ones that will hold their NAV the best, right? So if you think, crypto is going to go up, we've got 5 or 6 crypto-based ones. If you think it's more in the chips, then there's, AMD, Nvidia are right in there too. So I would say, the answer comes from what underlying is going to perform the best. So, and I don't have a crystal ball for that at all.
So Fever Dog, that's the best you're going to get. I think that
was at least something. I didn't blow the question off entirely.
Let's say YMAX, all right? YMAX.
But that's actually not a bad way to look at it because of its diversification, right? YMAX.
Every fund, essentially, except the inverse. But this is pretty cool. We need a kiddie fund that is for GME and AMC. And maybe Chewy now, right? I guess he's involved with Chewy.
Well, those have been in Ulti. I'm not sure if we did AMC, but those can show up in Ulti, right? So he doesn't have enough yet to create a diversified portfolio. Like you need a minimum of 15 tickers, unless we do the synthetic route, and then that's a whole different ballgame. But if we're going to do the individual names, again, we prefer to be along the stock. It would have to be But look, I think the meme stocks have continued to be interesting. Definitely something we've talked about. Maybe we do a little more of that in Ulti. We shied away from Chewy last week just because it's strange. It scares our primes, right? So when I say our primes, I mean our brokers, right? The place where we have our trading accounts. They get a little scared of those things and they slap a double requirement on it. They hold the GameStop options at a ridiculous rate that it actually can hurt other positions. So we try to stay away from it. But
Yeah.
I think you never know if we get back into those.
Yeah. If you make it a basket, maybe separate of Ulti, right? Because Ulti, everyone loves Ulti. Yeah. If you just add those to Ulti, they may ruin Ulti even more, right?
Oh, that's right.
But,
don't ruin Ulti with the kitty. Gotcha.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You just make Kitty its own disaster, or because AMC.
I'll try not to put out funds that are a disaster.
Exactly. Well, GME. I mean, I feel like GME is going to be around. AMC. I don't know. It's just
ride the coattails.
Yeah, but maybe they'll come back. Some of these questions are repetitive, so I'm skipping over some. This is a long one. Health, wealth, and relations. Will YieldMax use logic something like SCHD? Top 20 highest consecutive paying equal weighted. Yeah, so this has come up, I guess, a few times, like a YieldMax, maybe probably another YieldMax of the best funds, the best of the best funds, right? So people have been asking about that because YieldMax, you can't really change it, right? It's going to store every fund as you go, equally weighted. But what about a fund of the best funds? Is that something? Is it too early to think about that?
No, already thought about it. We like the concept of the fund of funds, right? And you're right. YieldMax today is the universe of the covered call funds. So can we do one that would allow us to pick the best funds, whether it's from a dividend or overall performance? Yes, absolutely something that has been discussed.
What do you think? Top 5, top 10?
Yeah, sure. 20 is a lot. It probably makes sense to rotate it monthly and go with the top 5, but definitely, that hasn't been filed yet, so can't put too much info out there. But I think it would be a more active list of what we saw based on some criteria, so it wouldn't be a surprise, but some criteria that would get it into that fund of funds. But yep, agreed.
Okay. Can you stagger? So another term for it. Stagger the payment dates on some of the back to the payment dates. See,
I think we covered that.
It's everyone loves. They don't want a budget. They pay it every week. Has YieldMax learned anything new, or does it plan to employ any changes in strategy to capture more upside on the next Tesla run? I don't know if this is a question of, is there going to be another Tesla fund that has a different strategy? Maybe that's a question, right?
Yeah. Look, so the answer is yes, for sure. We think that there's an opportunity for evolving the tactics a little bit here to be able to capture more upside, for sure. I would say, this does require a change in filing of the prospectus, right? So it's lawyers, it's SEC review, things like that.
Yeah.
But I would say it's absolutely something that we discussed internally. In the most recent filing, I believe you'll notice that we talked about using calls and call spreads, right? Which is something that would capture more of the upside. So hopefully that shows we're starting that evolutionary process. There's the Rod, to what you just talked about with, hey, do you have to file a whole new fund? There is the cannibalization piece, right? I think we could probably figure out a way to dance between that, the best of both worlds, and give people one strong Tesla choice, unless it's like what Max suggested, which is like a target. But besides that, we think it doesn't make sense to have two very, very similar funds.
Yeah.
Let's just make them, kind of cover both worlds there.
Yeah. So if you're going to do it, you're going to modify. If you modify just one prospectus, like Tesla, for example, you're probably going to have to modify all of them, right?
Yep.
They're all going to have similar terms. Okay.
All good stuff. All fun lawyer stuff. Yeah. But stuff that's very doable, right? And hopefully I'm letting you guys know it's something we're actively working on and thinking about.
Will YieldMax be creating an ETF for Canadian markets? I thought, aren't these available? I don't know.
There are some style like this in the Canadian markets. There's a company that does like a 50-50, half cover calls, half long stock. So there are, Canadian products already. So I don't think we'd have to wade into those. They are not as popular as YieldMax, but I think, but they exist. I didn't know if that means also Canadian stocks, right? So
Yeah.
But if it's an ADR on the U.S. markets, we'll do it. Like Airbnb, I think, is Canadian stock.
Okay. Oh, here you go. Thanks, Joe. Don't forget to hit the like button. We got 383 people on, by the way. That's a lot for me. When are you going to provide the Retire on Dividend fans some free YieldMax swag? I think I asked you this in New York.
I don't even know what that looks like. Everybody send me your email address, and there you go. We'll send something out. I'm kidding. There should be a way. Actually, we should talk to it's a legitimate request, right? Like, why don't we? I mean, by the way, if you ever want swag, you can buy it on the YieldMax site. We put that there from the YieldMax ETF site. I think there's, you could pick stuff up there. But we have done giveaways in the past. I don't know why we don't do another one. I will bring it up. I'm not the marketing guy. I'm just a trading guy. And I get to do these things, right? But I don't
think about it. If you give out free swag, you'll have everyone in every state wearing Tesle shirts, right? So it's a free advertisement there.
Yeah, there you go. Sure.
Tesle can make a cool shirt because it's a cool ticker, But
license plates. Just put them on everybody's license plate.
There you go. Bumper
stickers, every state license plate.
Retire on Dividends bumper stickers. Are there any more funds that you plan to have the payout in the same? Well, I think you said the inverse fund of funds would fall in that week, right?
Yeah, and even I think probably any other funds of funds would fall on that week. Like we just talked about a few other ideas that we're kicking around. So I think they'd fall into that category. But again, we do know there's kind of a different family of YieldMax that could definitely pick a different week.
Yeah. Okay. If they lose from Tanku, if they lose on the synthetic, does that impact the distribution or does it just decrease the NAV?
Good question. So what we've followed so far, and Retire on Dividends focuses on this for sure, is when the synthetic loses, it's obviously going to be reflected in the NAV. Nothing we could do there. NAV stock goes down, NAV goes down. There's nothing to stop that there. With those scenarios in those months, we'll just distribute the money we made, the premium we made selling the short-term calls. We won't do anything with the loss. We won't hold back the distributions either, right? So there's and that's how you get like the return on capital. The ROC, the return on capital, is when we distribute, even though we lost money for the month because we have to roll the synthetic. So I think that answers the question. It would impact. It shouldn't impact the distribution rate because we'll still pay what we sold the short calls for. You'll just see it impacted in the NAV, but you'll see that every day, day by day.
Yeah, but the flip side is, I guess, kind of the opposite, right? If we win on the synthetic, you will reward shareholders for that, right?
We will, because of that whole 90% distributing the gains problem, right? Like, let's say we never distributed any of that. We're just solid. Like, let's take coin, for example, right? And we're solid 60, 70%. But then at the end of the year, you'd have this like one lump sum, right? Which to catch you up. So we would much prefer to distribute gains on those synthetics earlier versus jamming them all into the end of the year. Plus, you're right, we reward those investors because then if the stock goes down, you could be neutral. You would have rather have taken that cash on that, if you made the money on the first roll. So, it's a little bit of the planning for the taxability and the dividends at the end of the tax or fiscal year. That is the reason why we give those out early.
So if there's a huge loss from the prior month synthetic, that's not taken into consideration, right? So if we huge loss prior month, new month, we win big. Even though that win is not more than the loss from the prior month, you're still going to pay more based on that win, right?
Yeah, historically, that's what we've done. We're not locked into that by prospectus, but that's the methodology we've used.
That's what I've noticed you've done. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's because it's really hard to estimate sometimes, when that happens, because sometimes you win so big. Like Misty's first month, I think it was like $8 a share. I'm like, no way. There's no way.
It was $4, but it's still a big one.
Oh, you paid $4.
Oh, we paid $4.
You made like $8 a share.
We did. We were like, we can't distribute 250% the first month.
Could you imagine? Oh my God, I don't know what that yield would have been, but
well, that would have been it. The distribution rate would have been 250%. I remember that, and us going, but the fund was so small, it was like, okay, that's unsustainable. And if it is great, then we'll have to pay that. But we just, you knew the fund was going to grow and absorb that.
Here you go. Here's a question. Do you ever watch YieldMax TV YouTube channel?
I have been pointed to that channel a few times, and I have watched a few of them, as I try to watch everybody that covers
Yeah.
us. So, I'm always open to viewing what's out there.
He loves my channel, just so you know. All right. Let's see.
Seems like he wants to make nice with you these days.
Yeah, I know. I would like to go only YMAX. I don't know what that means, Ivan. He would like, I guess he likes YMAX.
Yeah, look, I mean, if that's so, I would tell you this. Like, I have a lot of clients that are advisors that reach out to us, and investors that are advisors. My first suggestion to an advisor that's managing other people's money, start with YMAX as your core, and then add around it, add weighting where you want that. Whereas I know a lot of individual retail investors, right, do-it-yourselfers, like to pick and choose on your own. Great. There's nothing wrong with having a core of the YMAX fund or YMAG fund. It's going to have lower volatility than almost all the other ones combined, right? So if you want stability, there's a good answer.
Maybe we should talk about the YMAX. The famous conversation this time of month, just so you know, is the YMAX estimate of what we're going to get paid versus the dilution up until the actual ex-dividend date, the day prior to ex-dividend date. So is anything going to change with that, or is the plan, like the gap that we have, which is like a week and a half, is that staying as is?
There are no plans to change any of the timing of that as is. I know when you interviewed Chris Mullen, who's the portfolio manager for YMAX and YMAG, along with me on those, he probably walked you through a little bit of that process. Yeah. I think the first month that dilution was exacerbated, it has been significantly less. And I don't recall how Chris was planning to anticipate that, but I know they do continue to work through that a little bit. Yeah. No plans to change the timing or shrink that timing down anymore.
Yeah, because as in time, right, as the outstanding shares grow, the increase in outstanding shares will be much less of a percentage base, you would think, right?
Yep, so, just because the size is bigger, right? So it takes so much more. Like when that first month came out, if YMAX was 10 million and 5 million flowed in, it was a huge dilutionary impact. But now YMAX is, I don't know, over 200 million. So it'd be much harder to impact that.
Yeah, like this month, I'm showing, based on my guesstimate, it would have paid 40%, had it paid out right away, and it's going down to as much as 35%, which again, 35% is still good, but again, they're still keeping that in the price, right? So it's not a total loss. I try to do my best to explain that.
That's a little fund accounting stuff, and I think you understand.
Got a good video coming out about that soon, actually. You answered this.
It's fiat and dips are the two tickers that are coming out. Fiat on Wednesday, dips a couple weeks after.
And chips.
Well, chips, that's the Nvidia piece, right? So that's where the chips and dips came from. The dips is the inverse Nvidia YieldMax.
Chips when's chips coming out?
We don't have a chips. There's actually no ticker that's chips.
Oh, okay.
We don't have a chips. It was just us saying, maybe I probably said when saying chips and dips. There is no ticker for chips, but maybe we'll do chippy.
So there's fiat, dip. No.
Fiat is coin, right?
Yeah,
inverse
fiat is coin.
And dips is inverse Nvidia.
Okay. And then that's it, file-wise.
Apple is R.o.D, the inverse Apple. Rotten is out there.
Okay.
And then there's the Qs, an inverse Qs, and then an inverse ARC.
Oh, yeah. Do you think... I'm surprised you made that one, because ARC, it's not as big a hit anymore, right?
Well, and maybe people would rather be short Cathie Wood than long Cathie Wood. Remember, there was a fund that came out, SARK, that was the inverse of Cathie Wood. So you just bet against her. So if people want to take the inverse bet and have yield, then maybe it'll be popular. But
they probably want to do that with what's his face, Mad Money,
Oh, the Jim Cramer picks.
Yeah, a short Jim Cramer fund, right?
There's one of those. Sure.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, there is.
There you go. Little compliment. Thank you, Jay, for
Christoph.
all your hard work. All right. So Can Nvidia maintain? So far it is. Right? What was it at?
So far it is.
29 today, I think.
I'm taking a look. 28.10. 28.10 it closed at. Yeah, look, it all matters if Nvidia can maintain, right? Like that's the trick on Nvidia.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone said, "Oh, the correction." Like, all right,
it wasn't that bad. Had a little correction. It wasn't that bad.
I'm still waiting for this correction, right? But all right, Adam Dwight. I know you answered this. But he sent $5. Thank you, Adam. How will lower interest rates affect YieldMax ETS? Please provide funds that. See another. So you answered the Treasury one. So Adam, he already answered that. Basically, there's no effect. In summary, and then the last week, it's noted. Aware. All right, the next one is about pay dates again, so I'm gonna have to skip it. We just talked about this. Can Jay discuss the dividend dilution of YMAG and YMAX? I don't know if you want to talk about that anymore, but
yeah, I think unless we wanted to, return some capital, which in this scenario doesn't make a lot of sense, I think that dilution problem will exist. There is, I will comment something else. So let me give you a little more color on YMAX and YMAG. We have the ability, because the underlying funds can go down, to harvest tax losses. So you'll appreciate this one. So imagine where we got a fund that's in, let's say, whenever GDXY goes in next month, right? And it's trading at $18. Let's say gold drops and it goes to $10, or GDXY goes to $12. We can close that, realize a loss from a tax perspective, and then replicate GDXY with the YieldMax positions, the actual synthetic, the short call, right in the fund itself for 30 days to avoid the wash sale rule. In those scenarios, we should be able to kind of do some offset of this dividend dilution problem that exists in this fund to fund. So I don't think this is kind of a persistent problem. Chris and I are meeting tomorrow morning. We're probably going to talk about this as one of the things that we'll hit on. I'll make sure we bring it up again. But there's probably some ways to start to manage through that a little bit. So you realize a loss, so you can distribute, and it won't be, be like a distribution where it's return of capital, where it won't be taxable. So that's always a benefit. Like we like when we have the distributions that don't have a tax impact. So maybe we could time some of that there and offset that. But again, it's right now, it's fund accounting. It's, it's a fact of the fund of funds that they just have to deal with.
Okay. And I know they asked this many times, but they did send $4.99.
I love people. These are like long-term buying questions.
Exactly. Like I said, they're a newer channel. They love Nvidia. I know that. So they want to make sure it's around 10, 20 years.
Like if I was to think of what are the things that would stop it from being around, maybe that's a better question, right? Yeah. It's that the funds, just all of the funds left, like all the assets left the funds, and it went from being a $700 million fund to a $7 million fund, and it just wasn't economical for us to keep it around.
Yeah.
Or there's maybe a regulatory reason, right? But from a strategy perspective, we love these. We love that we, are kind of helping to break new ground here. We don't have any intentions of shutting them down at this point.
Are any of the current funds in danger of being shut down?
YieldMax funds. YieldMax, no. I would say no. But look, I think you could, like I just gave you the reasons of what to look at first, which is, look for the assets in a fund. So if a fund has been around for 6 months and a year and it hasn't, garnered any interest, it can be shut down. By the way, it's very normal for funds to get shut down, right? The ratio, I don't know if you know this, the ratio of funds that get launched to funds that get shut down, I think I got this right. 4 out of funds that are launched are shut down within a year. BlackRock just shut down 20, right? So I think it was 20. So they go through this. This is a very regular thing. It's like, hey, we put out a product, nobody wants it. No reason to pay for it to be in existence. Nobody's buying it, right? So you shut it down. So it's a very normal thing to happen. YieldMax has not had any shutdown. I'm knocking on wood there. So I think we are kind of bucking that trend against other brands, and we'll see. But so far, there's no plans to shut any of the YieldMaxes down.
So DSO and Zomo, like they're okay. I think they may be the lowest. I'm not sure, but
yeah, they're in the $20 million range. That's okay. Those funds are, around. They're a little shy of break even. They do cost us a little bit to keep those running, but we like them that they're there. We like that they help diversify YieldMax, by the way, right?
Yeah.
So as YieldMax grows,
exactly.
those will grow a little too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a question I'm actually curious too. With QQQT and SPY-T targets the same, was there a consideration to make QQQT higher based on the IV?
Yep, there was definitely a consideration, but I think we prefer to capture more upside with QQQT, right? So the give up is if you're not going to harvest as much income, you should get more upside. So that was the thought is don't, try to get more upside with QQQT because there's more IV there. You're right. And plus I think the Defiance folks thought from a marketing and branding perspective, 20 is a nice number and just make them all 20, right? If we want to eventually have a different number, then you can there too. But 20 has been a nice number. I could be wrong, but I think there's a discussion about adding 20 into the name somewhere.
Yeah. Who would have thought nowadays 20% is considered low, Who
would have thought? It's a brave new world here.
You got to love it.
Yeah.
I guess here's a chance for you to plug any other funds aside from YieldMax Defiance ETFs that we're well aware of. Are there any lesser known Zega or title managed ETFs that you think would be interesting to the community?
So thank you for the question, of course. I think when it comes to the higher distribution rates, there's one I would think of. It's Theta, THTA. It's a fund we run for SoFi. That is a pure option strategy. It sells high probability options. Its target distribution is 12 to 15% annually. It's also a fairly new fund, but it's a strategy Zega has been running for 14 years since our inception. So there's a lot of good info on that one. It really is a truly completely separate from really what the market does, right? That strategy has historically made money every calendar year that I've run it. It's made money. So I don't know a lot of things that you could say that about. So that might be interesting, THTA. And then we have a hedged equity strategy, which is our first one. It's the only one with the Zega name in it. It's ZHDG. It's our hedged equity strategy. So market exposure, but with a hedge. And then we have a partner with David Nicholas. Nicholas X is it's X funds from Nicholas Wealth. FIAX, it's more of a very stable, 7% distribution, not a lot of volatility, meant to be a replacement for like AGG or BOND, kind of a fund like that. So thanks for the question. Thanks for letting me pitch those. I do think this community would like THTA. And for those of you that are worried about volatility, the Z hedge strategy is meant to really reduce, that volatility.
Okay. Here is a question from Brandon. He heard that XDTE and QDTE, which are the Roundhill funds, were 60-40 long-term, short-term capital gains. Is that true for YieldMax, or is that taxed at income rates?
So not true for YieldMax. It is true for Defiance, though, right? Because we use index. So the classification that those Roundhill funds use and that the Defiance funds use are Section 1256 contracts. It just gets a special tax treatment because indexes are actually treated more like a commodity from a tax perspective. There's a lot of reasons why that is, but we don't have to go into that. YieldMax can actually have less because when you have return of capital, as I mentioned before, that's not taxed, right? So it all depends. I don't know what the tax rate is going to be for YieldMax until the year is over and we know how much of a return of capital we had. So it's a different treatment.
Yeah, and the other thing, so the losses, like Tesle, for example, right? There was a lot of losses in the first year. I read that you can carry those losses forward as long as you want, right? As many years as you want.
Oh, the fund can, yes.
Okay, so
yes.
So even if like huge profit this year and everything you pay out, you still have enough losses essentially that you could be all return of capital. based on
Yeah,
the
it's a
prior
good,
year.
tax question. I try not to get too in
Yeah.
depth, but I believe you're correct.
Okay. Yeah, because I did
Don't hold me to that one.
when I because Tesla, when I read the annual statement or whatever, I added that to my carry forward losses, to add it to this year, because I told everyone I'd track Tesla for one full year, one full fiscal year, and see what happens at the end. But we are at 1 hour, so my face is looking weird because there you go.
There you go.
But I want to leave. I know you're obviously busy, but I wanted to give you a chance, if you want, to ask questions to the community, if you have any questions for them.
We thank you for all the comments and suggestions. We always, welcome those. I feel like for the most part, we've probably hit on a lot of them. We've probably got some things that we haven't been asked about yet. So we always absolutely appreciate those. The thing that I would just continue to bring up to the community is I think I saw a question earlier about how you would respond to people saying YieldMax is a scam, all those kinds of things. Again, this is not a risk. These are not riskless strategies. We've definitely seen when the underlyings drop what the risk is to the portfolios, right? So it's a thing I always just want to make sure people understand, right? When you buy one of the YieldMax ETFs, you're taking on the majority of the risk of the underlying single stock. And so if you don't like the stock, don't buy that YMax fund.
Yeah.
I just remind people of that point. I'm trying to think, questions that I would ask directly. I do have a question. I do wonder how many folks are using these funds in retirement accounts because of the tax advantage treatment, right? That's always interesting to see. And then for those folks that have advisors, but also do it yourself, or they kind of have a mix of their assets, we know a lot of folks do that. What has been the reaction from their advisors when you talk about these kind of new kind of funds? Because these have not been around long enough for people to be familiar yet. So, it'd be interesting to hear what the reaction is from their advisors that they talk to, because we know that educating the advisor community will help, make these more prevalent, make them more acceptable. My hat's off to this community for, taking the risk and trusting us on these new style funds. We're very pleased with the way they've performed, both price wise and asset wise. But always interesting to hear how we could get more connection with your advisors as well as other retail folks.
Here's finally an answer on that. Most advisors don't know much about options. It's probably true, sadly.
Sadly, they took a test at one point. They should have known something about it. But yeah, that's true.
This one, just regular account. I have mine in a taxable account, but my plan is basically it's emergency income, right? So I'm building up like emergency income because my wife recently she's staying home with the kids now, so it's there if we need it.
I guess there is that you have to weigh that, right? If you plan to take a portion of the YieldMax distributions, you don't want those in an IRA. But if you don't need distributions, putting them in an IRA probably makes more sense. I get it.
I like this answer. They don't like it because it doesn't fit their 4% rule. They're probably brainwashed. They have to use that 4% rule, which this kind of ruins the whole 4% rule.
Sure. It blows it out of the water, right? It changes that dynamic quite a bit.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people answered. I'm not going to go through all of them, but did you have any other questions for the community? Obviously you could check back later too, the answers. I can't keep up with the comments today. Oh my God. That's good.
That's great. No, great. No, again, I'm just happy to be here. Let's do, let's do more of these in the future.
Oh, look at this. My advisor would not allow me to use YieldMax.
Are they still your advisor? Just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Are you still using
your money?
That's
it's always your money.
That's crazy. I'm sorry. Did you say?
The only other thing I was going to say is I know you provided the filings. If people have other kind of high flyer stocks that they like where there is, significant option volume, doesn't have to be too crazy. We'd love to hear more suggestions. We're always looking for kind of the hot stocks to get into the process, because we know if people are interested in the underlying stock, they definitely would be interested in the YieldMax version of it. So, I think there's some interesting ones coming, like SMCI, Palantir. Those are some good ones that are in. There's actually a lot of good ones. And when I say good ones, interesting, stocks that have a lot of volume every day.
Yeah. So, for them to reach out to you, though, they should go on the website, right? Hit contact us, and then put in their email. And once they do that, once they send a question, they're added to the email distribution list. Right?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's the best way to get kind of notified. And we don't use it for marketing purposes. It's more of information of new launches like Fiat, right? I think that went out recently, or that's going to go out tomorrow. And then also when we have the distribution notifications.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and the last thing I'm going to say, I know we talked about this in New York. Nvidia, I'm showing Nvidia and Coney have paid back from inception 94% of the original investment. Who is going to win? Or is it going to be a tie because next month they're both going to pay it off?
All right, so I prepared that information in advance of this. My math says they will both hit the $20 distribution mark next month, but it looks like when they cross that line, Nvidia's a little higher. But they both look like they'll cross the $20 mark. Yeah, however, that being said, it looks like Misty gets there faster than anybody else.
Oh, time-wise, yeah.
Like Misty looks like, potentially, I'm doing all the compliance disclosure here. Potentially October would have paid back $20 when it launched in April. So that one's rolling obviously fairly quickly, and the volatility is there to maintain it, right? So as soon as that dries up, then you have that issue. But no, it looks like Coney and Nvidia will distribute $20 net. Their total will be $20 by next month. Coin did it a little faster. Coin did it in 11 months. I think it's going to take Nvidia 15. But again, I don't know anything that pays you back your initial investments in a year and a half, unless you're, wildcatting oil wells. I don't know anything that does that.
Yeah, exactly.
So not a scam.
When that happens though, there's got to be some kind of celebration video or something. But or if you guys should have a celebration. But if you don't have anything else, I'll mention to everyone that you do have a book, right? I don't know if you want to plug the book before we go. You have a book called Buy and Hedge for anyone interested.
Yep, Buy and Hedge. It's more about, it's like our Z Hedge ETF that I mentioned here, and this community might not find that as interesting, but it's really in the second half of that book. The first half is about why hedging and how reducing volatility matters. The second half is all about teaching people how to trade options on their own. That's why we wrote it. So it could use an update, but I think we put it out in 2010, so it's a little old. But thank you for everybody that has a copy and bought it. Appreciate the support there.
Hey, it's still there. It's still there to buy, right?
Still there
until you make the new one.
Yes. So if you, Derek and I, one of the guys in my shop, he and I do a podcast every week, the Broken Pie Chart podcast. He and I are definitely kicking around what the new book will be. I would tell you, absolutely, Synthetic Covered Calls will have a chapter in that book.
Sweet. I'll have to get that one then.
Thank you, Rembrandt. Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, if that is all, I just want to thank you again for your time. Thanks for coming back to the channel and not shutting us down, regardless of how many poop emojis we give you or, Life Vest and synthetic bailout icons and all that. So,
how many growling little J's you have on there?
Little J still likes me, I think, right? He didn't kill me yet. He almost did, but it's okay.
Very funny. Enjoy those, man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again for your time, Jay, and hope to have you back soon, maybe when a new fund or two launches.
Sounds good. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Take care. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.